I'd like to start by making some comments about the so-called humanitarian pause. Before going into the cabinet meeting last night, Benjamin Netanyahu said, "We are at war and we will continue the war. We will continue until we achieve all our goals." It's very clear that in the mind of Netanyahu and the Israeli cabinet, that this is a very short-term pause, and when it is over, that the killing will resume. Their intention is to resume the killing of Palestinian men, women and children, and to carry on with the genocide. And for that reason, it's clear that what is needed is not a humanitarian pause, but a complete and total ceasefire. If the bombardment stops for 4 days, then the bombardment should stop for good. All the protests that are planned in this state and internationally for the weekend should go ahead. This is not a time for stepping back from those protests. The opposite is the case. In fact, now is precisely the time why people need to step forward and double and treble the size of those protests to bring more pressure to bear for a total ceasefire. It's worth asking the question as to why did this pause happen? I think the anti-war demonstrations that have taken place internationally are a factor in this. In particular, the protests that have happened in the United States. Next year is an election year in the United States. 68% of the public polled in the US want ceasefire. There have been millions on the streets there, the largest Palestinian solidarity demonstrations in US history. So those who say that protests don't have an effect, that they're only symbolic, you see a small effect in relation to this, and it needs to become much bigger. I think as well that there was pressure from within Israel. I think the families of the hostages, with their Bring Them Home campaign, their March on Jerusalem, put pressure to bear on the government as well. People will see on their TV screens the release of hostages, and will be happy to see that. Here in Ireland, people will be hoping for the release of Emily Hahn. But people watching, the positive feeling that they get from seeing people being released will be absolutely and completely and cruelly tinged with the realisation that Netanyahu and his cabinet intend to restart the killings within a matter of days. And just briefly on the question of hostages, I would make the point that all hostages, not some hostages, all hostages should be released, and that includes the more than 5,000 Palestinian prisoners in Israeli jails, and the nearly 3,000 Palestinians who've been taken into administrative detention without charge since October the 7th. By the way, that includes 350 children. We found out yesterday that there are now more than 14,000 Palestinians have been killed in the last 6 weeks, more than 5,500 children, 33,000 people wounded, and more than 6,000 people unaccounted for. Which potentially means that the death toll is over 20,000, which would represent 1% of the population of Gaza wiped out in the space of 45 days. What's needed is not a humanitarian pause. What is needed is a complete and total ceasefire. And, by the way, an end to the root cause of the cycle of violence, which is a brutal, unjust and racist occupation of Palestinian lands. Okay, I've got 5 minutes, so I'll make some points about Shannon. 3 million US troops, more than that, have passed through Shannon since 2002. This has happened under governments that have been led by Fianna Fáil and Fine Gael, and have been participated in by the Progressive Democrats, by the Green Party and by the Labour Party. It has become, in effect, a forward operating base for the US military. 51,000 US troops passed through Shannon this year, up to the middle of November. Now, in his response this morning, the Taoiseach said, "The government is clear that no airport in Ireland, whether Shannon or any other airport, is being used to transfer weapons to the Middle East or to any other war." Well, how can the Minister say that? The Minister's not in a position to give a guarantee. I'll give you yourself, Minister, a second bite of the cherry on that, because we've been told that there have been no inspections of US planes. The guarantee is that the US Embassy, the US authorities, have said that there's no weapons being carried on the planes. And the government accept their word in relation to that. There's a hell of a lot of people in this country and elsewhere who would not accept the US's word in relation to that. And the state should carry out inspections. And by the way, if the state does not carry out inspections, well then, the workers, with the backing of their trade unions, should carry out such inspections, in my view. And with the genocide going on, that is an entirely justified policy for the workers to take. It would be in lockstep with the tradition of the Dunstores workers, who boycotted fruit from apartheid South Africa in the 1980s, and with the transport workers in Belgium and in Catalonia, who are refusing to handle planes and ships carrying war material to Israel at the moment. Of course, taking a stand like that in Shannon would potentially be in breach of the Industrial Relations Act, the Thatcher-style anti-union legislation introduced by Bertie Ahern government back in the day. But the trade unions should openly state that they're prepared to defy that in order to challenge genocidal policies in the Middle East. And let's see whether there are weapons being carried on US planes. We mightn't be able to prove where they're bound for, but if there's weapons on planes at the moment, are you going to exclude the possibility that quite a few of them would end up in Israel itself? The US is a major military backer of the Israel Defence Forces and their government, even while they're pursuing a genocide. So, I'm looking at the clocks this morning, 2 minutes 20, so I'll finish on this point. I made reference earlier to the question of the campaign waged by the families of the hostages in Israel, the Bring Them Home campaign. There's another important development in Israel that I want to bring to the attention of the House, which is the demonstration that was held in Tel Aviv last Saturday, an anti-war, anti-occupation demonstration. It was relatively small. There were hundreds of people in attendance, but I believe that it was hugely significant. It was the first anti-war, anti-occupation demonstration in Israel in the last 6 weeks. It took place despite having to go to the Supreme Court to stop attempts to block it from taking place. And it happened despite the fact that the police vetted placards and confiscated placards, and that the Israeli far-right counter-protested and used a sound system to try and drown out the protesters. But they got their message across, and I want to let them know that their initiative was seen. I salute the bravery of the people who were involved in organising that, including socialists in Israel, including from the sister party of the Socialist Party, Socialist Struggle in Israel itself. It was a small demonstration, there were hundreds on it, but I sincerely hope that that number grows to thousands and tens of thousands in the week ahead, and joins in with the worldwide global opposition to this war that we see on the streets of Dublin, of New York, of London, of Paris, of the capitals in the Middle Eastern countries, and the opposition to the war that we see first and foremost. And I salute the bravery and the resilience of the Palestinian people and the people of Gaza in standing up to this horrific bloodshed and genocide being inflicted upon them by the Israeli state and their backers in foreign governments. Thank you.
Thank you.